This is How About That Podcast, a show dedicated to all things Dallas Cowboys. With both objective and subjective perspectives, How About That Podcast is your place to hear about America's team. Now, here's Joseph Hoyt and Danny Morales.
So I need to tell you guys how I woke up this morning. It is Monday, April 29th, and I'm an idiot because I figured, hey, the draft is over. Sunday was kind of the follow-up day to the draft, so we got some content out. We did a podcast. I was burnt out. I'm like, you know what? Time to breathe. Let me sleep in just like a little bit on Monday morning, right? So I wake up around 8:30. I've got a doctor's appointment at 9. I'm like, you know what? Let me check Twitter. And the first thing I see is sources from 3 hours ago. So 5 a.m. Dallas time, Zeke is coming back officially to the Cowboys. It's something that we all figured would happen, but even despite that, I was like shocked. So I was literally the Michael Scott meme, jumping out of bed, like the, oh my God, it's happening, sprinting to the computer so I can get a quick story out before going to the doctors to get my nose vacuumed. What a manic Monday way to start off the week. Danny, Ezekiel Elliott come back to the Cowboys.
Isn't that a song, Manic Monday? I think.
Yeah, that's why I referenced it.
Oh, very, very good. Nice pull, Joe. Yeah, it happened. I kind of hoped it never would, but here we are. Zeke's our RB1.
What do you mean you hoped it never would?
I mean, like, I feel like we're shopping at the Goodwill store right now. And not to say that's a bad thing, because there's some great values there. But is that the best we can do? Like, is that the best America's team can put out there right now? Is Zeke? I mean, you look at his numbers, they're just declining year after year after year. And this just tops off your all-in offseason. Like, you're going to tell the Cowboys fans you're all in and your move is to re-sign Zeke Elliott?
It sometimes feels like that sports franchises and GMs are kind of looked at as like, oh, these all-knowing, really intelligent, galaxy brain, chestnut checkers kind of people. And it's just funny that, to your point, in the end, we're circling back to a guy that they picked fourth over, a guy that they, from a cap hit standpoint, not an actual doling out of money here, from a cap standpoint, said, hey, we'll accrue a $5 million cap hit last season, a $6 million cap hit this season, and then we're going to bring you back after we did all that just to say goodbye.
Yeah, this just feels like the safe move. It's like they must feel the pressure from everyone on the outside. Everyone's aware that their running back room is severely lacking talent or high-end talent. And so it just feels like the easy, safe move. Let's just get Zeke. Let's just quiet the fans. Let's show that we did something. But for me, I don't know.
But Dan, you're a Cowboys fan, and you're the pulse of the Cowboys fanhood. I saw Skip Bayless talking about this morning as an instant reaction of like, this is just a PR move. And you kind of hinted at it a little bit. The one thing I push back is, how many Cowboys fans are genuinely like thrilled about this?
Well, the only reason I'm happy is because the only Cowboys jersey I own is a Zeke jersey. So now I can actually wear it to the games without getting shit because he still is on the roster. So I'm happy from that perspective. But from an on the field standpoint, like, you look at what he did in New England, you look at what he did in his final year in Dallas, like, he just doesn't have that explosion. I don't think a defensive coordinator is going to lose any sleep knowing that they're going up against Dallas's run offense this year. Like, there's just no fear. And in my opinion, the best, when Dak Prescott's at his best, is when you're not asking him to drop back and throw 50 times a game. When you have a balanced offense, when you can build off the play action, that's when Dak is his most efficient. And when your running game is severely lacking, which I think it might be this year, I think you're setting Dak up for failure, asking him to throw 30, 40, 50 times a game, because that's not peak Dak Prescott.
No, and that's kind of what I would agree with too. Even though I do think it's not the best, but you could still win, in my opinion, with Dak throwing that much. That's just my opinion. Depends on who you're playing. I don't think that's a playoff winning formula.
But that's when the turnovers start to happen. That's when Dak starts setting league records for interceptions. And that's when he starts getting all the criticism, is when he's throwing all these picks. But when he's asked to throw 50 times a game, when you're asking these secondaries to drop back in coverage, when you're asking the D line to just pin their ears back and rush, it's just not a successful formula for this Cowboys offense.
No, and I ultimately not the ideal formula. But let's circle back one thing to Danny. I want to just check with you. How did you find out about the return of Zeke? And what's your reaction? Because kind of what I hinted at earlier. Yes, it's been rumored for a month. This weekend, it looked probable, especially once they didn't draft a running back. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, which makes me think that that was their plan all along to a certain extent. But what's your reaction just seeing that it actually happened?
It's like going into Christmas morning and you expect to get like a new bike or something like that. Like your parents promised you this huge present all year, and then you show up on Christmas morning and you have like a set of Legos.
Whoa, 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 whoa! What are you doing crapping on Legos here, Dan?
I mean, I'm not a Lego guy. I'm an outdoors kid, Joe. Give me a bike. I don't want Legos. So, and your parents promise you all year that, hey, big presents coming. You've been a good boy. Just wait. And then they deliver that gift on Christmas. They're like, hey, surprise, here's your Legos. And you're just like, yeah, I'll play with it. I'll have fun, but that's not what I wanted. If that makes sense. Kind of a weird analogy, but
I mean, I'm still can't get past the fact that you're, dogging Legos here. Why are Legos catching strays from Danny Morales? Who are you?
I'm not a Lego guy. I was more Lincoln Logs, or is that before your time?
So you're not a Lego guy, but you're a Lincoln Log guy?
They're more realistic. Yeah.
That's like saying I'm not a Coke guy, but I'm a Pepsi guy. One thing, good research here from the great Third Eye Raven himself. One thing we should touch on is, okay, so the Cowboys didn't draft a running back. They signed Zeke. Ergo, what were their options after the draft concluded and they didn't pick one? Here are some other free agent running backs available. Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt, Cam Akers, Rashad Penny, Jerick McKinnon, and Damian Harris. Danny, are you taking any of those guys over Zeke in your mind? Or is the familiarity with Zeke and just what he has built in Dallas in terms of a locker room presence, is that overwhelming to anything else on this list?
That just feels like a list that Zeke just fits right in with the rest of them. There's no game changers at all, in my opinion, at that position. They're all serviceable backs. Um, Given the right offense that you built around them, you could succeed with those guys. Kareem Hunt, Cam Akers, if he could stay healthy, Rashad Penny, we've seen glimpses, but for what they could bring on the field, more so than Zeke, I don't see a ton more. So the familiarity with Zeke, I think, would outweigh me going after any of those guys personally.
Yeah, one thing to note with Zeke, he reportedly, according to Jordan Schultz, had other offers. This was something that he said that he wanted to come back, or according to sources via Jordan Schultz, that he wanted to come back to Dallas, that was a fit. Let's do a quick timeline breakdown of how this all came together. Probably about a month ago, I think that the rumors were kind of starting to whisper a little bit out there about, hey, a possible Zeke reunion. And it was at that point where, like, hey, the free agency hasn't gone all in like they hoped. They didn't go get Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry. They didn't even go get J.K. Dobbins or anything like that. They signed Royce Freeman, but that was looked at it as something that was not that big of a deal, or something that would keep them from drafting a running back. Then Wednesday before the draft, and this is, Danny, when I thought the smoke really accelerated, the fact that Zeke was in the Cowboys facility having a steak dinner, or Stephen Jones said, we had some beers with him and Rocky the night before the draft, made me think that not only was there interest, but that might have been their plan prior to the draft to begin with. But we still needed to see how the draft shook out. So first round, obviously Tyler Guyton comes and goes. Still, night one, Thursday, we are talking about how Jonathan Brooks is the best 30 visit or best interview that Jerry Jones has had in 30 years. There's a lot of interviews in the pre-draft process that have happened over that time, but Jerry was talking about how enamored he was with Jonathan Brooks from Texas. Jonathan Brooks instead goes 46th overall to Carolina. Two other running backs had gone by the point the Cowboys were drafting 50, or actually two other running backs had gone by the time they were drafting in the third round, 87th overall, which made me think at that point that they were going to take a running back. You thought it too, right?
I did. I think everyone did, and that whole Zeke story you tell me, it just seems like it just paints this picture in my head, like on draft night or the night before, where it's like the whole Cowboys front office is sitting around looking at their board. They're sitting there with Zeke drinking beers and like, oh, we like this guy, and then you got Zeke in their ear. No, no, I'm still better than them, and it's like it almost looks like a lack of professionalism. Like, put your opinions of Zeke aside, worry about Zeke after the draft. But I feel like they went into the draft with this Zeke mindset. Like, we like him a lot better than what could be on the board. And then when they saw Jonathan Brooks go off the board, they were like, all right, screw it. Zeke's our guy, whatever. And so it's a little frustrating. It's a little frustrating to give that.
I could see Steven and whoever else was there at that steak dinner kind of having beers and relaxing. Well, Will McClay has just kind of got like a pencil in his ear. He's got a shirt and tie, but the tie is all kind of open up and his sleeves
It just
rolled up,
seems
and
like
he's just
so
grinding on tape.
unprofessional. Yeah. Well, that just doesn't seem like how a NFL front office should be run. It's almost comical.
Will McClay's calling Southeast Missouri State's wide receiver coach to get the last bit tidbit of information on Ryan Flournoy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And sorry, for those of you that are listening and not watching, I have a background on that I can't change now that the recording has started. So
Well, that's what the reason I take the reason a little behind the curtain here. The reason I messaged you take that off. I think that might be something that's like causing a little bit of technical connection difficulties.
well, you were shooting the fireworks graphics before, so I just wanted to fire back, and now now I can't change it.
Yeah, for some reason on our Riverside app, if I put two thumbs up like I did to signal, okay, Joey, I'll do this silent countdown thing we're trying out. All of a sudden, fireworks went off in my background, which I thought was just emblematic of this morning. Fireworks for the Zeke Elliott signing. It felt fitting. So there you go.
The only fireworks that I think of with a Zeke Elliott signing are those little rinky-dink sparklers that little kids can use.
Just the kind of deflating ones where it's just like, "Ew," and then just
Yeah,
spins around for a second. Oh no, you're talking about sparklers, like where they like sign their name in the with the smoke a little bit.
yeah. When you're like 5, yeah, those ones.
Well, that's a firework. So quick, let's go back to this is one thing I want to. I think this was the pivotal point, and I saw Todd Archer tweeted this out too, and I agree with him. When they decided to go Maris Liufau, and this is something we talked about actually yesterday as the pivotal point. When they decided to go Maris Liufau rather than a running back at 87, I think that signaled that they were very, 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 very okay with Zeke Elliott being their quote draft pick at running back.
Which makes it even worse because I look back and I took a look at what running backs were actually off the board at that point. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Brooks, Benson, and Corum were the only running backs off the board at that point.
Jalen Wright, Jalen Wright would have fit nice in this offense.
He was my favorite running back from the beginning. And the fact that you had Jalen Wright, you had the running back out of USC, you had Braylon
Who,
Allen.
by the way, took a visit with the Cowboys. That's something speaking of Todd Archer, he reported today that was a 30 visit for the Cowboys, was Marshawn Lloyd from USC. Came out today.
Which is even more perplexing as to why he's sitting on the board and you just are fine passing on him. I don't understand that. And I saw something where I forgot who reported it, but they said if they would have moved up back into the fourth, it might have cost them a next year's third. Which I mean, time will tell if it'll be worth it or not. But this running back by committee plan is the cherry on top of a pretty piss poor offseason.
Of note, they do have a bunch. They have 4 compensatory picks they're projected to get next year. So in theory, they could have traded one of those picks from next year, knowing that they were going to replenish at least a few of those picks. They did that with their 7th round pick. That was the strategy of, hey, we're trading that 7th to go get that extra third in this year's draft, so that because we're getting compensation anyway. So,
But those comp picks, are they going to be anything higher than a fifth? Probably not. From what I heard, it was like a sixth or a seventh based off the formula.
but you'll get 4 of them, and you could use that again to move up potentially and trade up next year. Long story short, they were going to get some ammo back anyway, so you could have mortgaged your future, quote unquote, a little bit in that scenario.
And I also feel like the Eagles taking Shipley was a little jab at the Cowboys just to try and deplete the position. Like, they don't need Will Shipley. Not that I would have wanted him anyway. But, like, what's he gonna do? Sit behind Saquon? I can't stand Howie Roseman. God, he pisses me off.
When did the funny thing, quick aside about Howie Roseman, is just, and I'm curious from a Cowboys fan who's watched Howie Roseman's roller coaster career. And the reason I say roller coaster is because there's been a lot of highs, but there was a point in the Chip Kelly era where Howie Roseman was literally, I think, put in like the bullpen, or like he had his corner office literally taken from him. They were about to potentially move on from Howie Roseman. Now he's the golden child in Philadelphia again, the guru of the draft, the savant of trading, and you have Cowboys fans just hating the guy.
We gotta talk to Joey Ice again because, like, they just signed that massive extension for A.J. Brown. They just re-signed Devontae Smith. Where does this money come from? They have the highest paid player at so many positions. It's like they're just printing money out there in PA. I don't understand.
Yeah, I wrote a story on Lone Star Live. You could Google this and check it out, comparing just the business aspect of how the Cowboys and Eagles have operated recently, but also how they operate in the future. We talked about active cash spending and how the Eagles this coming season are going to spend literally over $100 million more than the Cowboys, and yet they're both competing for an FC's crown, which is interesting. But next year too, if you look at it, they've got a lot of, they quote unquote don't have a lot of cap space. But to your point, I feel like we'll be talking here a year from now. Look at the moves the Cowboys made when they go acquire, for some reason, Devontae Adams in a trade for a fourth round pick or something.
And I was also curious to see who drafted the 6'7" receiver out of Florida State. It was Johnny Wilson.
Yep, to the Eagles, right?
I was like, yeah, I was just curious who took him. Of course, he's in Philadelphia. It's I don't get it. How is he so good?
That pick feels a lot like JJ Arcega-Whiteside, but like actually where JJ Arcega-Whiteside probably should have went, because I think Johnny was a seventh rounder, right? Sixth rounder?
I think he was a sixth.
Anyways, later in the draft, as someone who could be that jump ball kind of physical, big bodied, box out kind of guy. And it seems like they got him again, but for actually good value this time.
Not to correct you, it's JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
Oh, have you been to Ibiza in Spain?
Just so you know.
Yeah, no, I
Just so
appreciate
you
it.
know.
It's Danny. It's Awesome Richards, by the way. Awesome Richards, not Asim. So
Not to talk about the Eagles draft too much, but they also land Jeremiah Trotter Jr. If you could tell, I'm a little bitter about their draft class. Everyone just falls to Philly.
but that's how you're supposed to draft.
I know, but why is it always the Eagles? It's always the Eagles. I don't.
Uh, to be fair, Danny, the Cowboys had a good draft too.
I'm not. Yeah, not to knock them, but we could use the running back.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had. I think this is one thing we can establish. The moment that they drafted Maris Louis-Fowl, 87th overall, was the moment that signified they believed Ezekiel Elliott from the beginning was going to be their running back from this weekend, that they were going to get out of it. And it makes me wonder, Danny, who would have challenged that thinking, right? Like, was it Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks only? You know what I mean? Like, were those the only two guys? If they were at 87, that would have been a blinking light, and they would have taken him. It seems like Jonathan Brooks would have been, if maybe even at 56. Maybe they would have said, you know what, honestly, we love Jonathan Brooks, but we're not taking him in any pick before 87. So that makes me wonder. I don't think we'll know. Maybe we can ask around and figure it out. But that part of me feels like the unknown, and kind of the question mark is, who do they actually have from this running back class above Ezekiel Elliott? If their rankings went Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Ezekiel Elliott, it's interesting.
That is flawed thinking if that's the case. It just, what competent front office can go into a season, a very critical season with a lot of jobs on the line, thinking that Ezekiel Elliott could be your RB1 and that'll suffice? There's no way that a competent front office, which Dallas has shown that at times they can really believe that. You can't really believe that Zeke is your answer at running back. There's no way.
Jerry Jones said it, though. When he was asked if he believes that he could be RB1, he said yes.
God, that's not something I want to hear.
He also said that Ezekiel Elliott's last few games in New England, he showed a lot. And as we've kind of seen, actually, he didn't. I think he averaged less than, I was going to say, last 5 games, he averaged less than 3 yards per carry. He did have 2 touchdown catches and I think probably 156 yards on like 28 catches or something. So proved a little bit at least he could catch out of the backfield. Let's let's take a quick aside from questioning this move because there are a lot of questions and just strategically. Let's just take a look at Ezekiel Elliott as a player and what he could bring to the Cowboys briefly. Just a quick aside. Um, this is a guy that they drafted 4th overall, and we already talked about this. Back in 2016, that wasn't like, we're not talking like Cadillac Williams and Cedric Benson going top 5 picks. Like running backs were not going that high much anymore unless they were spectacular. But if you drafted someone that high, it was a sign that you believe that this guy was a difference maker. And to be fair, when the Cowboys drafted Ezekiel Elliott 4th overall in 2016, he ended up being a difference maker for a while. In his rookie season, a career high, by the way. So it only got worse from there, theoretically. 1,631 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry, first team All Pro. Very spectacular season. He then went 983 yards rushing, 1,434 yards rushing. So he went back up a little bit. Then 1,357, 979, 1,002, 876. And then last year in New England, 642 yards. His last 3 years of yards per attempt, 4.2 in 2021, 3.8 in 2022, and then 3.5 in 2023. One thing about Zeke that the Cowboys have talked about so far, though, and this is where I think that they were sold on this signing. Jerry Jones talked a lot on Saturday about how Zeke Elliott was a positive influence inside the locker room. That like he's always a positive, that they like being around him, that he's good for the locker room. Part of me thinks that when analyzing what happened last year from a run game perspective, with Tony Pollard being the lead and Rico Dowdle behind him, that they thought that there was something missing. And I think that they came to the conclusion that Zeke's presence might have been the thing they were missing. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's warrants him being the potential RB1 or part of a committee with Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn and yada, yada, yada. But it is interesting that they thought so highly of that aspect that they didn't bring him back, or they wanted to bring him back.
There's obviously something to the locker room and chemistry and team building and leadership that warrants some attention. I'm not going to discredit that, but games are won on the field, not in the locker room. And I don't know how much tread's left on the tires, but I think you could ask most people right now, at least in my opinion, Rico Dowdle is probably a more talented running back right now than Zeke.
Yes.
So if you're going to go running back by committee, I'd rather split most of the carries with Rico Dowdle than bring in Zeke. So sure, he's coming in for that leadership and that mentor role. But from a talent perspective, you got a running back in the building already that is more talented than him, that runs with power, runs with anger, that I'd rather give the ball 20 times to instead of giving 10 carries to Zeke a game. I don't see the benefit in that.
And then, Danny, that might be the plan, by the way. We're still far away from games. This is still, by the way, in post-draft signing. This is not, hey, he is going to be RB1. This is our signature poster boy free agent move, though the Cowboys haven't had a lot of signature poster boy free agent moves. Eric Kendricks.
Ooh.
One thing to note, last season, Zeke Elliott, 3.5 yards per carry. Rico Dowdle, much smaller workload, 4.1 yards per carry. And that was behind an offensive line that we agree was not best at run blocking. That's the other thing I think we should touch on, Danny, and tell me what you think. We don't know yet. These are 2 rookies that are going to replace these guys, right?
Yeah.
But one thing to consider, Tyler Biadasz and Tyron Smith, I thought, good, really. I mean, obviously Tyron Smith, incredible pass blocker, right? Tyler Biadasz, really good at kind of recognizing blitz schemes and kind of helping out the offensive line from a pass pro perspective. Run blocking with those 2 last year, not great.
No. But also something I've noticed is why sign Royce Freeman and Zeke? It almost seems redundant because people like the power and the short yardage capabilities of Royce Freeman. And I think that's all that Zeke offers at this point in his career. So what's the point in signing both of them? Because to me, Rico's your RB1, and you got both those guys for your short yardage backs. Like, how's that going to shake out? But to your point, yeah, I would agree. Like I've said, Tony Pollard really didn't have a whole lot to work with when he got the ball in his hand last year. He'd get the ball and have three defenders right in his face. So to shore up the interior of the O line is really going to go a long way, which is why I think someone like Rico Dowdle will be just fine. He's not going to lead the league in rushing. He's not going to run for 100 yards every game, but I guess you don't necessarily need that. You just need something to keep the defense honest, which I think a good O line will do regardless. So it'll be interesting to see. But like I said, that whole Royce Freeman, Zeke, Dowdle, Malik Day, it's just a crowded room of just like there's no guy in there. That's what they're lacking.
No, and I think let's call a spade a spade. If we're going to examine every running back room across the NFL, this is likely the worst running back room in the NFL.
I haven't looked at every running back room, but yeah, off the top of my head, any team I can think of has a clear defined RB1.
Or they drafted running backs this draft. How many running backs overall went in this draft? Joey, is that something you can check and then we can circle back to? Okay.
But even teams that have established RB1s were still taking backs, like Philadelphia, like the Rams. You got
San
Tyron what?
Francisco San Francisco took Isaac Garendo, and then they signed Cody Schrader from Missouri as an undrafted free agent.
I know when you said we got the Missouri running back, I was kind of excited, but we didn't get the Missouri running back. We got the Robin to the Batman combo there.
Which, if we're being critical again of the Cowboys, that's another thing I think I would be critical of. Okay, I understand maybe not want to use draft capital but after that Maris Liufau pick, you're like, you know what, we don't want to use a 5th round pick on name your guy, right? Rasheen Ali, we saw him in person, maybe not a 5th rounder, or maybe not a 6th rounder. Why not shell out money for a UDFA like Cody Schrader? That's where I was a little bit like, huh.
I was also surprised Blake Watson from Memphis went undrafted. He seemed like he was getting a little steam. He was getting some steam later in the process, but he goes undrafted. Granted, he's
Frank Gore
still
Jr. Frank
Frank
Gore
Gore
Jr.
Jr. Yeah, but to Blake Watson, maybe they're looking for a bigger back, which he doesn't offer, and they don't want to run the Tony Pollard experiment back with someone smaller. I get that, but at least take a shot, like prioritize that. But to look at how they prioritize their UDFAs with safeties and corners and tight ends, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me where what their mindset was post draft on who and why they brought in certain players.
Yeah, so think about this. Research from the great Joey Aliberti here. 20 running backs were taken. 20.
Dallas didn't take a single one.
No, they did not. And Danny, this is one thing I want to ask you. This is a half-baked theory of mine, so bear with me. This is something on the fly I was thinking. And I think it might be a little bit of an elephant in the room a little bit that is not really being touched on. One thing about the Dak Prescott negotiations that I think we need to keep in mind is the fact that it takes two sides to tango, right?
Yeah.
And who has all the leverage in this situation?
The quarterback.
Dak Prescott. The Cowboys, while they haven't really negotiated, quote unquote, a new contract extension, they have to know at least a number that Dak Prescott would want to go to, right? Whoever gives the first number probably loses in this situation. And they know how high Dak Prescott probably wants to go. They have an idea. And they're probably not comfortable with that yet. So, how do you bring someone with leverage to the contract negotiation table? You kind of give them an incentive or a reason to. Part of me wonders if this might be a move to appease the quarterback in terms of getting his best friend back in the locker room.
First off, are they best friends? I don't know.
They've said it. If you look at it, before Zeke signed in New England, he was in Dallas hanging out with them constantly. He still lives here, by the way.
So that goes back to this competency of the front office. Like, where does your priority lie? You want to bring your quarterback's friend in to have leverage in negotiations, or do you want to win games? Like, you got to get your priorities right. Like, bring in the best players. Enough of these like sympathy, get the band back together, nostalgic signings. It doesn't do anything for the Cowboys this year, next year, going forward, which is the reason why the Cowboys have been stuck in neutral for the past 30 years.
The one thing, by the way, contract compensation. One thing to note, according to Clarence Hill of the Fort Worth Star Telegram, $3 million 1-year deal for Zeke, $2 million guaranteed. Reminder, he already had a $6 million cap hit going into the season, which we talked about previously. $6 million could have gone a long way. It doesn't really do much now, but it could have gone a long way prior to free agents or prior to the draft when free agency was really cooking. Maybe the Cowboys were in on some free agents that they could have thrown an extra couple million via that $6 million pool. One thing we don't know, but very interesting.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Joey Aliberti. The Cowboys may not have the worst running back room in the league. Thank you, Las Vegas Raiders. Well,
I
this
mean,
is this is
I
this is
mean,
debatable.
this
This
is
is
very
debatable.
debatable.
Zamir White, okay, he showed something last year. Alexander Madison, eh. And then Amir Abdullah, who I'm shocked he's still in the NFL. And Dylan Lobb, is that the rookie from New Hampshire?
Yeah, I think it's Lob. I don't think it's Lobby, right, Joey? No. Okay.
He's the rookie out of New Hampshire, I'm pretty sure.
He is. Yeah, he's the kind of third down back kind of guy. So
But yeah, I mean, we could be the New York Giants and have Devin Singletary as our RB1, so could be worse.
this, I was going to say, very debatable. I think at the very, very least, you can make an argument the Cowboys have the worst running back room in the NFL.
If our comparison is the Raiders, I think the Cowboys might be losing that matchup.
That's what I'm saying. So, and hey, maybe Rico Dowdle in a bigger role ends up being a fantastic running back. I wrote a long feature about Rico last year. The dude runs very angry, which makes me wonder how much, tread on the tires they could, how much that could last. But for one season or a couple seasons, maybe Rico could stay healthy and be the guy that was kind of coming out of high school and college that people thought he would be. So
Every time Malik Davis gets the ball, I'm a fan of the way he runs.
I am too.
So, I mean, maybe he shines in the preseason, maybe he shines in camp. Maybe he could be a sleeper, who knows?
Maybe Deuce Vaughn takes another step. Maybe. Yeah, Deuce Vaughn looked good in the preseason.
Yeah, I mean, limited action last year, but when he did, again, it's not like he had anywhere to go. Like he could make you miss in a phone booth, but when you have three big D linemen in your face when you get the ball, he never really had a chance last year.
Yeah, when he's shrouded in a glass case of emotion with three other 300-pound dudes, there's not a lot of room to make people miss in that phone booth.
No, but it'd be fun to see him get involved in the offense a little more this year.
One thing I think, going back just to Deuce last year, I think that they had packages for him throughout the season. I think one thing that happened that they realized this early on, there just wasn't a lot of ability to get those packages into actual gameplay. So it was a matter of like, okay, are we gonna make Deuce Vaughn active for 3 to 4 plays a game? Or are we gonna have Jalen Brooks active, someone who could play gunner and play every single special teams and have that as a better presence for us? And to be honest, I wonder with Deuce how actually maybe the new kick return rules might actually either, this is the interesting part for me, either help him or not. Because I wonder if Kevontae Turpin, the new kickoff, sorry, I'm going to take it one step back. The new kickoff return rules are very rugby style, very punt return style now. It's not about full speed and go and kind of racing to the edge. It's about making guys miss in a phone booth. Part of me wonders if they maybe use Deuce Vaughn back there instead, who did catch some punt returns, even though Kevontae Turpin did too, and then make Kevontae Turpin a more active participant in the offensive game plan. Just a thought.
Or just put too deep and have some fun with it. Do some reverses, some fakes.
Yeah.
Let little John Bones Fossil get creative.
I mean, he likes to get creative, man. That he is committed to special teams. He's fun to talk to.
I would love to see Vaughn on the field more, but I think he's just such a liability in pass protection.
And maybe he takes a step there. Who knows?
I love the guy, but if you have a blitzing Mike linebacker in the A gap, like that's 230, 240 pounds. Good luck. Good luck.
Also, we talk. This is a very quick aside, and then maybe we'll wrap up the Zeke conversation. We talk about blinking lights with the Cowboys and guys that just keep jumping out to them and like who they would take, right? Maris Leafau, by the way, was one of those blinking lights for them. They love him. They're really excited for him. So I know we're kind of questioning the pick a little bit, but very interesting.
If that's who Mike Zimmer really was banging the table for, because I'm assuming that's a Zimmer pick. That's a Zimmer pick. It has to be. I mean, I don't think Jerry Jones or Steven Jones or Will McClay are going to bang the table for a linebacker.
Paul Gunter too was a big proponent of that pick. So
Okay, so someone else. So,
well, both of them. I think it was Zimmer and Gunther who have a similar mindset. So
and I would trust their expertise at the position. They've been around long enough. They've shown that they can run a pretty competent defense, where the linebacker is a focal point of that defense. So, if they see traits they like, I would trust his opinion 100 times out of 100 over mine. So I can't question it. If that's who he likes, we'll see. We'll find out.
and that's the beauty of the draft, by the way, with like, oh, he was projected to be a 5th round pick. Well, it doesn't matter where he was picked ultimately if they end up playing well. Tyler Smith, I mean, people were thinking that was kind of a weird pick from a value standpoint when the Cowboys took him. Look at what he's done. So it's interesting. But back to my original point about a blinking light, the guy I can't stop thinking about of what he would have looked like in a Cowboys uniform is Peyton Wilson.
Yeah.
And I know the medicals, I know that, right? But you just watch that dude play. And even if it was only for 3 to 4 years, I think high level 3 to 4 year play from a 3rd round pick linebacker, especially when you're trying to go all in, would have been worth it.
What you just described reminds me of like peak Sean Lee. Like, yes, he was always hurt. Yes, he had medical questions coming out of Penn State. But when he was on the field, he produced. Like, he was one of the most fun linebackers to watch since I've been a Cowboys fan. Granted, his career was shortened with injury, but kind of the same thing. I was getting Sean Lee vibes from Peyton Wilson.
So was I. One note on something you said, Danny, and I kind of want to correct you potentially. You said Cowboys fans who have Ezekiel Elliott's jersey can at least be excited because, like now you can wear that jersey back.
Don't tell me he's changing his number.
I was going to say, what if he changed his number?
I should get a refund then. But I think because 21 was Gilmore, correct? Oh, no, he went single digit.
No, he was 21. He was 21.
Okay, well, he's gone. So I don't think with the new number changes anyone picked up 21 when they showed that yesterday.
I don't think so either. So maybe they knew.
Wasn't he wearing 15 in New England?
He was, but who has 15 in Dallas?
Trey Lance.
Yeah.
Zeke wearing 15 just looked so bad. It didn't. Well, the fact that he was in New England, first of all, that man does not belong on the East Coast. But
dude, I thought he looked good in a Patriots uniform with 15 and the visor, and I thought it was a good look.
I hope he brings the black visor to Dallas because at least he'll look good. He'll look cool. He'll look good. But will he produce? I don't know.
See, one thing I wonder about visors too, and this was something that even like back when I played, you kind of like you had to like get over, was like, if you're going to be a dude with a dope visor, in my opinion, you better be a stud. And obviously Zeke he's got pelts in the wall. He's has had a fantastic career.
Fun fact, Joseph Hoyt wore a visor in high school.
That's right, dude. It wasn't a dark visor, by the way. It was a clear visor.
Are you calling yourself a dude?
Dog, when you're all county, you're a dude. Okay? When you're a 5'9", 180-pound safety who ran a 5 flat 40 and you're all county, you're a dude.
5'9"? Have you grown 2 inches since I've last seen you?
I'm not 5'7". Get out of here.
I can see the top of your head, Joe, and I'm 5'8".
That's not what? You spew all these fake news about my nose, and now you're spewing fake news about my height. I wasn't 5'9". I was probably 5'8". But still.
You're lucky they can't see your lower half because I know damn well you're not 5'9".
Well, why do you think I'm tiptoe Joe, dude? Come on.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe that's why you're 5'9".
Exactly. Hey, honestly, height in numbers, there's no objective fact in numbers. It's all perspective, right?
Yeah, you can't measure heart, Joe. You cannot measure heart.
Back to my original point. If Zeke is like wearing the black visor and like, but he's on the sideline and only comes in for 3rd down blitz pickup and then gets like, kind of run back like Azeez Al-Shire did to him when he played his final snap as a Cowboy previously at center, then it doesn't look as dope.
Yeah, that was his lasting impact on me as a Cowboy fan, sitting there right in the back of the end zone for that game, just seeing him get pancaked as the Niner fans just laughed at me.
How do you leave a game like that, Danny? When you're a fan of the team that loses, how did that go?
With my head down, like a sad puppy dog.
Yeah,
just getting all these insults flown at me from these classless Niner fans.
That's what I was kind of wondering, was just like, are people just like absolute, like you're just kind of walking, with like blinders on and you're just hearing like just things constantly being thrown at you?
Yeah, and after living in the Bay my whole life, I could say that Raider fans are probably classier than Niner fans.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah,
Whoa.
it's that bad. It's that bad.
Whoa. That might be the
Yeah.
hottest take you've had on this podcast.
I just speak facts. I've lived through it.
You literally speak subjectiveness, which is why you're here on this podcast.
I'm just a paying customer at Levi Stadium trying to support my team, and I'm getting insults and beer and all types of stuff. Not good. You wouldn't see that in Dallas. Jerry Jones wouldn't stand for that shit.
All I heard was I'm in pain, and then you cut off.
Long story short, Niner fans, no class.
All right. Let's move on a little bit. Any last thoughts on Zeke, Dan?
No, I've given all I have to give on that.
Joey, as a New England guy, do you have any thoughts, or is the lawnmower still going? What do you got?
Lawnmower's not going. I gotta say, the first thing I have to mention is 15. That was what he wore at Ohio State. He made his name wearing that number 15 jersey.
Looks good.
As a Buckeye. I don't think it's as bad of a look as you think, Danny. I know you got those, those cowboy tinted lenses on, and so you just want it back to the glory days, back to those late 2010s.
As someone that spent $200 on a Zeke jersey with the number 21.
200?
Yeah, at Jerry's World, he got me.
That's on you. That's on no one else but you.
Exactly. You're buying jerseys at the stadium?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was the first time I was there. I was pumped. I was like a tourist.
Classic.
Ran to the pro shop. I wanted a Zach Martin jersey. So the Cowboys pro shop, I don't know what they have now, but back then, piss poor selection. So I had to settle for a Zeke. I wanted the Zach Martin.
It's funny and ironic that you settled for a Zeke jersey, and now it feels like the Cowboys are settling for a Zeke reunion. Segue.
I will say very quickly on the Zeke stuff. Not that this is saying much on a terrible Patriots offense. He led the team in rushing yards and receptions last year. I think, like, compared to all those other free agents that I listed, I think he, like, on top of the familiarity, I really do think there's a little juice left in the tank. Obviously, it's not what it used to be, but he's not on a 5-year, $90 million contract anymore. There's not that pressure. And I agree. I think Rico Dowdle will that'll be a decent tandem that I think will be okay as long as the Cowboys O-line is okay.
Which they have the best interior O-line in the league now with Cooper Beebe.
Is basically a Hall of Famer already.
They have 3 Hall of Fame linemen on their interior. Can you believe it?
I mean, Tyler Guyton, might as well just give him a full jacket. Terrence Steele, he's one bad season, but he's on his way.
Yeah. That's a contract that's not looking too good.
Yeah.
That's also a contract that they can probably. I thought one thing that was kind of under the radar about that, and this is a very quick aside, we can talk about it later. The fact they didn't restructure him almost makes me think that they don't want to tie themselves to him much longer, because they can get out of that deal, I believe, for nothing, not too much, maybe next season, hypothetically. We can re-examine that later. All right, let's move on really quickly. Danny, I want to talk about the undrafted free agents that the Cowboys signed. And we're going to run through really quickly, and then we'll get your thoughts. Not a lot. I mean, there's a couple guys here that are intriguing, but not a lot of big names. Like I said, I think if they would have signed like a Cody Schrader or something like that, it would have been interesting. They signed Minnesota tight end Brevin Spann-Ford, who I think is the crown jewel of their free agent class. They gave him a lot of money, a $20,000 signing bonus, according to the Dallas Morning News. Northwestern wide receiver Cam Johnson. 2 guys from Central Florida, linebacker Jason Johnson and tight end Alec Holler. I tweeted out an Alec Holler clip where he makes an incredible one-handed grab. Wouldn't have counted in the NFL. He only got 1 foot in, but it was still incredible. South Dakota linebacker Brock Moggensen. East Carolina safety Julius Wood. Illinois defensive tackle Denzel Daxon. Minnesota wide receiver Corey Crooms. I also had a highlight of him from his time at Western Michigan when he was teammates with Marshawn Nealon, mind you. Crooms has some juice and some burst to him, even though he didn't do a lot of Minnesota. Baylor linebacker Byron Vaughns, a local guy from Fort Worth. Illinois defensive back Solo Turner. Texas A&M safety Josh DeBerry. Missouri running back Nate Pete, not Cody Schrader, but the other Missouri running back. And Nevada safety Amani Johnson. So, Danny, quickly, any guys stick out to you?
Well, I think what stands out to me is the lack of a running back, or other than the running back out of Missouri, and it's not even the running back from Missouri. It's the secondary running back that they had last year. But I would have expected this thing to be chock full of running backs post-draft. Bring in some competition and quarterbacks. Where are the quarterbacks? You got no one on the roster, no one under contract after 2025. And I look and I go, wow, there's no quarterbacks, which I don't know if they've signed one since, but I didn't see any. And then you see one running back, and it's not really a name worthy of, I mean, no disrespect, but not a big name or someone I've heard of prior to the draft. So do they like their quarterback room? Are they going to get guys signed past this year that they haven't come out and talked about? And I think the lack of running backs speaks volumes to their confidence in the current room. And the fact that the most noteworthy name is a tight end, the position that arguably you're the deepest at right now, that's a little confusing. And Brevin Spanford, great blocking tight end. There's some value in that. But who on that list do you think has a realistic shot at making the 53 this year? Because I couldn't pick one out.
I think Spanford has potential. You don't give a guy a $20,000 signing bonus undrafted if you don't think he has a chance to make it.
But are you going to have 4 tight ends on your roster?
Well, Sean McHugh, free agent, hasn't been re-signed.
Okay, but I'm talking about Schoonmaker, Ferguson, and Peyton Hendershot.
I think that's the question mark moving forward. And John Stevens, mind you. Don't forget about him.
Another one, yeah.
I think the guy who needs to be on a little bit of alert is definitely Peyton Hendershot. Yeah, so, I mean, would you be shocked, Danny, if their tight end room ended up being obviously Jake Ferguson, Schoonmaker, Spanford, a guy who might have been one of the best blocking tight ends of the draft. Mind you, this is a guy that was projected to go a lot earlier than not drafted at all. Didn't. 6'7", I believe, big dude. And then John Stevens, a true pass catching kind of mobile tight end. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the 4 rather than Hendershot and then maybe like re-signing McCune, for example.
And I'd be okay with that. I think they're putting an emphasis on getting bigger, getting more physical. And if you want to bring him in on obvious rundowns, go 2 tight end sets, then sure, I'm in for it. That works. He's not going to give you much in the passing game, but how many teams have 2 passing or pass catching threats at tight end? You already have Ferguson. Now you have your run blocker and Spanford. So I guess from that perspective, it makes sense. But I still can't wrap my head around the fact that there's a lack of quarterbacks and running backs on that list.
Yeah,
you got to create competition in camp, and where is it? I don't see it.
Yeah, according to Dane Brugler, his beast guide, Nate Pete was ranked the 43rd running back in the draft.
So 20 running backs got drafted, and the Cowboys walked away with the 43rd ranked running back.
Yeah, on a $5,000 signing bonus, which is not much.
No, it's peanuts to them, but they got to prioritize the position a little more.
They did. His name is Ezekiel Elliott.
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. That's like telling me Chuma's a good left tackle.
Well,
and Ladd McConkey's a good receiver.
I will say they got 3 Hall of Fame offensive linemen on the interior now in Dallas, so there you go. Okay, one thing I want to do quickly, and we're going to wrap up after this. So for the first time, Danny, and I want to talk more about this later, but I want to touch on it now. For the first time this Cowboys offseason, they have now added more players than they lost. Let's exclude free agents. And let me give you a rundown of who they lost first, okay? Tyron Smith, Tony Pollard, Jonathan Hankins, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biotish, Dante Fowler, Noah Igbenogany, Neville Gallimore, Michael Gallup, and Leighton Vander Esch, right? Here are their additions. Additions specifically. I'm not talking about re-sign guys. Eric Kendricks, Ezekiel Elliott, Royce Freeman. Draft picks. Tyler Guyton, Marshawn Nealon, Cooper Beebe, Maris Liufau, Kalen Carson, Ryan Flournoy, Nathan Thomas, and Justin Rogers. So for the first time, and again, I want to talk about this more on another podcast, but briefly, gut reaction. Are the Cowboys better or worse in terms of additions and departures than they were a year ago?
That's such a tough question because you have so many unproven guys. It's like, yes, they did lose players, but on the flip side, they have replaced those players, but they did it via the draft, not via free agency. So that's something I probably couldn't even answer for another 2 or 3 years to see how these positions actually pan out. But if you were to ask me right now, in this moment, are they better now than they were last year? They're not. I really don't think they are, but they have the potential to be. because they short up that O-line. Everything starts up front. Everything stems off that protection. Your passing game, your running game, controlling the clock. If you can keep your defense off the field, your defense will be fresh. You keep your guys rotating. I think that has a lot to do with it too. So to answer your question, today they are worse. When the season starts, they may be better. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about our subtext campaign. Please sign up. It's very fun. You get to text with me and we get to talk Cowboys. If you have a perspective about the Ezekiel Elliott thing, signing, text that group chat text that chat. And then we could even talk about it on the pod with your name. If you want to be heard on the podcast, we'll do mailbags on there eventually. So please sign up for that. All the information is on LoneStarLive.com. Literally type in like Dallas Cowboys text Joseph Hoyt on Google. That'll come up. Please subscribe, rate, review. Any sharing with your friends is awesome. Trust me, I drove in traffic a couple times this week to get to the Cowboys facility, and it sucks. And I think hearing the smooth sounds of Danny Morales' voice might help that ride. So there you go. That could help. But yeah, we're really appreciative. Danny, any last thoughts before we head out of here?
Just a quick question. Who, in this moment right now, who do you think from this draft class will have the biggest impact on the Cowboys in 2024?
So you cut out a bunch there. Did you ask who is going to have the biggest impact in the 2024 class?
Correct. Why
are you asking questions you know the answer to?
Besides Cooper Beebe.
Okay, there you go. You better hope that it's Tyler Guyton. I think that's got to be what you hope. I don't think Marshawn Nealon's going to be asked a lot in his first season. I think that's more of a developmental pick. Kalen Carson could make an impact if there's injuries or other things, which are bound to happen. Ryan Flournoy, I think more developmental than anything. Who might make the most impact? What if Justin Rogers ends up being their starting nose tackle day one and plays all 17 games?
I told you, he's a buttermilk biscuit shy of 350, so good luck running against that guy, Green Bay. Good luck.
All right, and then last thing, Danny, anything on Morales' mind you want to touch on?
What is on my mind right now? I guess the biggest question is, are they done in the running back room in this offseason? Is there a move that we haven't seen? Do they have something forecasted? I'm holding out hope that this Dameon Pierce rumor comes to fruition. Am I foolish for having optimism the front office is going to get something done? Yes, because they're just going to disappoint me. But I guess that's my final thought is the running back room, the way it sits today with the addition of Zeke, the running back room they're going to go into the year with? I'd like to think not, but my better judgment thinks that it is. So
that's on Morales' mind. One thing I want to just touch on really quickly, that I know this is a lot, I keep adding things, but in the Zeke signing, I think one thing we should wrap up with, Danny, is the idea that this should not make or break the Dallas Cowboys in 2024, in my opinion. I think that he rounds out the running back room. I think the success of the running game is more contingent on the run blocking, in my opinion, and kind of opening up holes. And I think guys are like Rico Dowdle but at this point in the offseason, even if they drafted a Jonathan Brooks, there's just hope that this guy, that would be a difference maker. But what you're really expecting probably is somewhere, you're not expecting Ezekiel Elliott's rookie season where he was a first team All-Pro and ran for 1,600 yards out of Jonathan Brooks. I wouldn't expect that. So at the end of the day, after they passed on a running back in the draft, which I think is the bigger storyline, I don't think that this is a quote unquote bad signing for the Cowboys.
No, I think he'll be a complimentary piece. I don't think he's going to be the fixture of the offense. I don't think he was brought in with the expectation that he would be. So maybe I'm being a little harder on him than I should be, but it could work out. It may not. He's not going to be a 1,000-yard rusher. He's not going to get back to 4.5 yards per carry. Unrealistic. That's not what we need. 3 yards a pop, 4 yards a pop. Keep the defense honest. That's all we need.
And there you go. All right. Well, that was another episode of How About That Podcast. And tune in again later this week, as we'll probably give you another episode of How About That Podcast.
Thanks for listening to How About That Podcast.